Okay, so I am tired this morning, but I'm out here after this rainstorm, and I meant to earlier this week. I went crazy and trimmed back a ton of my Thornless Blackberries, and so I wanted to kind of show you what I learned. They were completely taking over this bed. It is a 4-foot wide by 16-foot long bed. And I actually planted the blackberries. I planted 4 of them in each bed for the proper spacing. And I'm glad that I did, because I found out very quickly just how much space these blackberries take up when they're not dormant. Now, these are evergreen for the most part, but the leaves do kind of change colors, which you can see here. They've changed colors because we had that long freeze here. So they were kind of dormant. If we have warmer years where we don't freeze, which can happen here, and used to be the norm, then they don't turn that color. They just stay growing all year round. And we got blackberries out of these plants up until the freeze. Now, some of them are still kind of growing and putting off new growth, as you can see. And if you don't want a giant blackberry bush, I highly recommend trimming these down to form more of a bush, because even though they're a bush, they get crazy long. Here's a really good example, walking around, just how long and how out of hand these blackberry bushes can get. So that's crazy that it is a bush, but it will grow like a vine if you allow it to. That's an insane amount of growth. And actually, look here, we have a little lizard, a little garden lizard hanging out. And that's so cool. It's really cool when you get some wildlife into your garden, and believe it or not, they actually help maintain pests a lot, which is really nice. So it's all kind of growing out of whack, but I did notice something which explains why these have taken over this bed so much, and that is that there is a new plant that popped up right here. This is a 5th plant that came from this plant right here. The roots send up new shoots. So there's an entirely new plant. And you can see I've kind of trimmed it down some here. And that's because I'm going to take this plant out and I'm going to plant it directly into the soil. Now, we have clay soil, really thick gumbo clay soil. But these grow excellent here, and these are actually not planted into this compost. This is mushroom compost right here, and you can see it's kind of broken down since we put it in there and turned to really beautiful soil. But I didn't plant these into that mushroom compost. I actually planted them into the clay soil, then built the bed around them, and then we filled it with a layer of black mulch, because honestly I didn't know about the dyes in black mulch originally, and it just won't be something that we use again, because we put it in our play area and people's feet still turn black when they walk through it because it's turned into dyed soil. And so we put that at the bottom layer and then added this mushroom compost on top. Now, over time, once a year, I just add the mushroom compost on top and fill it back up. But these are planted all the way down. They're just sending shoots up through everything. And you can actually see, like, now it's been established how this lettuce has popped up on its own, because, and so has this one from the last year's garden, because we do use all of this extra space inside these blackberry plants to grow turnips, which you can kind of see growing here, lettuce, whatever will possibly grow. I'm really gonna have to go look through last year's videos, because I know I have a couple of videos where this is just completely full of lettuce that's growing underneath these blackberries during the cooler months, which is cool. And so I've trimmed these blackberries down a significant amount, and the reason that I felt comfortable doing that is that these are the Prime Arc blackberries, and also the Traveler blackberries from Arkansas State University. They are a thornless variety, and they're a primocane variety, so the new growth that it sends up this year will produce berries, and then the old growth, which you can tell the older growth because the new growth is lighter and green. It looks like this. And the old growth is a woody growth, more like this. And you can kind of see how big the bottoms have gotten. These will produce for a good 15 years with the way that we take care of them. So it really is just a plant once, come again crop. It's a great thing about these. They're thornless, so that makes a really cool crop for the kids, but also they are perennial, so they just keep coming back year after year. And the reason I felt comfortable cutting them is because these, the first year growth and the second year growth, produce berries, which is really great if you live in a hot, humid climate and have to battle things getting too thick and needing more aeration. This is a really cool disease-resistant thornless variety, and like I said, you can cut it back and not really lose a huge harvest. But I'm glad that I did get the urge to cut it back because it was all in the walkway. And see, this is another plant that has come off of the other plant, and I didn't even notice. It's actually had time to become woody because I didn't notice. And so here's the original plant right here, one of the originals. See how thick that is? And then here's one of the new growth that's shot up from the roots and produced a new plant. And you can tell that our plants are in shock because they went from all of that cold weather, and it's likely going to get cold again here. And now it's been 77, and it's sending up all of this new growth everywhere. Just so look at this, a whole new shoot coming up. So that can be dug up and also a new plant. But also I'm creating my own plants, because if you cut these off at an angle, you can actually stick them into the ground just like this one was, and they'll produce a whole new plant. And so here's another example of a plant coming up from the shoot, just shooting up from the roots. And here's a plant that I actually put in the ground. Let's see if it's got any roots on it yet. No, it doesn't really have any roots coming off of it yet, so I'll just stick it back in the ground. That's not that big of a deal. These are such forgiving plants. You really can just cut it off at an angle and stick in the ground to form new plants, which is really cool and really intense. Here's actually one of the ones that I cut all the leaves off to grow it, and it's actually producing new growth, and there are some root fibers right there you can kind of see starting to produce. Just really cool. So you can see the carrots growing in between the beds. Like I said, we grow in between everything to make the most out of it. So the cool thing is, if you have any diseases in your blackberry beds, which I actually had blackberry gall earlier this year, and so I cut these plants all the way down, like took all of the plant out off that looked infected, and look at this, it's just shooting back up now that it's getting warm again. So I wouldn't be too quick when you cut these down to dig up the roots and throw them out, because they could produce again. Likewise, if you're trying to get rid of these, know that you better dig up all of that root, because it will produce another plant. Look at this. This is one that I actually cut and stuck in the ground. And this is the plant it originally came from. And it is actually producing its own new growth. It has created a whole root system. So that will come out. So that's 3 new plants right here. Not including the other ones that I'm propagating. And so I put 4 in each 16-foot wide bed because that's how much space they fill. And you can imagine that we're going to have a ton of blackberries. And look at this. This is all on top of these bananas. These are all the blackberry cuttings from earlier this week. That's how much I cut off of these plants. And they're already growing back and producing. So these are a really great variety, especially if you want a crop and then a bumper crop, or just all year round blackberries. Okay, so here's some of the blackberry cuttings that I've actually already put in here and started rooting. And I know one of these hasn't produced much root. I think it's this one. It's just really, it has a little root on it. You can see there's just not a ton, but it is rooting. So you can literally cut this off and stick it in the soil and it will grow. But here's one, And this is the one I'm most excited about showing because look at the root system on it. I mean, it has produced so much, and it's actually got a really nice thick root system. I'm really impressed with this. How easily it just rooted and created a whole blackberry plant. So that's 5 blackberry plants right here, and I can just remove some of the soil over and put it back in the ground, in the pot. Put some soil back on it, and it'll be just fine. These are so forgiving. Look at that. So that's 5 right there, and 2 that I intentionally created, and 3 that are growing in the garden on their own, plus numerous ones that I have planted around the garden. And I'm really excited about that. That's about 14 or 15 more blackberry bushes that I grew from cuttings or that sprouted on their own. And that's really exciting. So I'm just thrilled about that. Okay, so I'm trying to set the camera up to show you the angle of me digging this up. You could use a shovel to dig it up, but I haven't been. I want to try and use my hands because I don't know what's going on with the roots under here or where all they're attached to. So I really want to be careful about digging up the roots in the wrong place and damaging the mother plant or whatever else is down here. I'm not even sure how deep the roots are. It actually looks like they're going all the way into the clay. I mean, also, the reason I really want to dig this one out right here is that there's actually a grapevine growing not even a foot from it. So I'm seeing a lot of roots from that grapevine. Look at the root system on this. And that's just what I was able to get out of the ground. There's a huge system I can't reach, but even though this lost a lot of root, it's not really damaged. It'll be just fine. These are such good plants and so forgiving. But you can see all of the root hairs on here. And this is what I'm talking about. This plant, even after cutting it down, it still had all this on it. And this. And this side here, that's a massive plant that grew all on its own. And look what's left behind here in the soil. Just all of these roots. And look, here's more roots from the mom plant. I can guarantee you that's going to turn into another plant. So, and here's the grapevine I was talking about. It's so close. So that's kind of the issue I was having. There's just so much in one area. So if you have blackberries, I want you to know that it'll just pop up all over the place. Beware of that. You'll come out here and have a ridiculous amount of blackberries. My shovel's actually really old, and so I just grabbed the closest shovel to me, and in the process of trying to get it out, look at this. It broke the entire handle off. Here's the handle to the shovel right here. Well then. That's funny. The great thing is, I'm actually impressed by the soil because all the soil was created when the leaves and everything from the plants, the stuff that we grow in it, earthworms, insects, and that mushroom compost broke down over the last several months and has created this beautiful soil on top of everything. And I'm really impressed with this. So, because I wasn't really prepared to dig this up, I don't have my gloves on, but it'll be fine. It'll just be a muddy mess together. I can't believe how big this is. So in case you're wondering why I am still planting in the ground but doing raised beds, this is the area next to this from the rainfall we had last night. It's a pretty good amount of water there. And it's only a little ways from where the raised beds are. And so the raised beds help when it's super rainy, just to kind of keep all this water off the roots of the plants and soak up the water, so that when it's dry, we have all of this ability to grow, and that we just can't have when it's raining outside. But also, whenever it is super dry, all of the soil around it and the mushroom compost helps soak up the water and retain it during seasons of drought. So it has two uses. It kind of helps control the water when there's too much water during the rainy season, but it also helps to water and feed the plants whenever it is really dry outside. So here's kind of where this bed ends, and we know that they're about 4 feet apart. So right here is where it's going to start again, and so these are 4 feet wide. So what I'm going to do is about the middle of this, because I know that's where the bed will be, is where I'm going to plant all of these plants that I'm taking out. I can go ahead and plant them, and then when I have the money to put in the raised beds and more soil, it'll be fine. Sometimes you just have to work in an order that makes sense to you. But just for show, look how big this plant is. I mean, it's massive, and I cut a huge amount of it off. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I had to go inside to get my clippers, but now I'm back. I'm actually going to clip this down some more. This is where I clipped it a couple days ago when I was trimming it. And so you can see there's already new buds forming where I clipped it, which is insane. It is a tell of the season. Already warming back up after the freeze. It's so confusing to these plants. So now what I'm going to do is kind of cut it at a 90-degree angle, but I'm going to cut it way back here below this bud. Maybe that's a 45-degree angle. I don't know. I'm going to cut it at this angle. And so that is all that I'm doing. It's really simple. And there's the plant now. It's much smaller than it was. And all of this right here can actually be cut into new plants. So if I wanted to, I could simply cut it like that, and then come up a little ways and cut it again. And I could strip some of these leaves off. You can, but it's not necessary. Where you're putting it into the ground, I recommend to kind of strip some leaves off. So if this one's going to go in the ground, this leaf needs to come off. And you really can just take your clippers and clip them off like that. Or you can leave them. It doesn't matter. And all you do is literally stick this plant into the ground or into some potting soil mix and keep it nice and moist over the next couple of weeks, and it'll produce roots. Same for this one. It's really that easy to produce new cuttings. That's 2 new plants, and you can cut them smaller than that if you wanted to. This one can make another 2 or 3 new plants, and even this large piece down here, that can be cut into new plants. So you can see how easy it is to propagate new plants with a little bit of effort. And honestly, if you don't feel like doing any of that, it doesn't matter, because here we have a perfectly good plant that grew all on its own, and we're just moving it to its own space. So if you don't know this about me, I actually garden and walk around in my yard barefoot a lot. It may make you a little nervous, especially with me using a shovel, and honestly, the shovel wouldn't work in a drier season. So here is the root system of this plant, and it's not super long. This is the hole, so it has a little bit of water in it. So I'm not gonna water this in or anything, but here it is. This will just kind of set right down there in the hole. And I know some people are probably worried about the water in here, and it could be an issue, but I'm just gonna put the dirt right back in this hole and it's gonna grow. I promise you, this variety is so forgiving. It really does work out. And when all of that soil goes on top of it, it's not gonna matter quite as much because it's going to soak all this water up. These roots are gonna continue to grow and kind of branch out around it. So I'm literally just gonna set the dirt and grass and everything that I took out of it right back on top of it. See what I mean by how wet the ground is? And it would be ideal to do it in drier conditions, but I cannot dig this clay soil out in dry conditions, and you'd be amazed how quick this is gonna dry up anyways. Kind of tamp it down some. You can see why I'm not watering it in, right? And that's it, just like that. I have a new blackberry bush bed forming before I even have the money to get the wood or the amendments for it. And because these grow so well in our soil, it's going to grow up and it's going to produce canes of its own. It's great timing to cut it back because new buds are forming right here, and by cutting back the top, I'm encouraging the roots to kind of grow out some and then allowing these to branch out. Now I do see that one branch right here actually isn't looking so great. Pretty sad looking. So what I'm going to do about that is just cut it off right here. Look at that. Now we have a really nice blackberry plant. They're so easy to grow and to propagate. Now one thing I do want you to take note of is that the bottom of this bush right here, it's not planted. You can see the soil line before. I did not plant it as high up as it was. This formed well under that soil line up top from the clay soil where the roots of the mother plant are. And so I wanted to plant it where the roots were actually coming from and the plant started. And it had to shoot all the way up through all of the layer of soil I put on top as amendment in order to grow. That's not necessary here. And another thing is where the other berry plants are, I can almost guarantee you that they're going to pop up with another plant in the place with the amount of root matter left behind. So that's it. It's really easy to kind of take care of these plants and propagate them. I do put some microlife acidifier in there every once in a while, so that's another thing to maybe note. But the great thing about the microlife is that it breaks down using fungi and bacteria over a period of 4 to 6 months, and it really doesn't burn or harm your plants in the process. It makes really beautiful plants. Anything in the rosebush family, such as roses or berries, and if I'm not mistaken, strawberry plants will benefit from this. See the strawberries growing. Strawberries, in my opinion, are excellent to grow underneath blackberries. They kind of form mats and protect the soil, and also all of this extra space around blackberries, it gives something to grow in that second crop that is so important. And here is both a strawberry plant growing and something I will grow as an annual, this turnip right here. So you can see we're really making use of our soil. And here's this plant that was popping up, another blackberry plant. So there it is. Really easy to create your own blackberry orchard out of a few plants. So I really hope that if you're in a place where you can't buy a ton of blackberry plants to get started, you can buy a few. Learn to make cuttings of your own and create your own orchard of blackberries for that and help to feed your family. So I was ready to sign off, but kind of as a PS, I wanted to show this, and you'll have to excuse my geese screaming like banshees in the background. But here's the initial plant that I planted, and here is a second plant right here that's 4 foot down, and here's one more, and then here is another one right here, and you can see the new growth starting on it. And those are the 4 plants in the same row in the new bed that I've started, and over time you'll see wood pop up around it and some mushroom compost just like in these beds. It'll look pretty much just like this around the edges of it, which is really awesome. So how great is that?